A children's movie about a candy factory should not have a stinking river. It should not have a screaming author threatening to sue. It should not have a leading man chipping his own tooth on camera and refusing to stop the take. But Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory had all three, and a lot more besides. Behind the golden lighting, the singing Oompa Loompas, and one of the most beloved performances in movie history, sat a scrappy, underfunded, occasionally chaotic $3 million production that almost fell apart at nearly every stage. A river that rotted under the lights. A real candy bar made to cash in on the film that melted before it ever reached a shelf. A novelist who hated what they did to his own book so much he refused to let anyone make a sequel. A villain played by a man who had survived something far darker than anything in the script. And a movie that flopped so badly in 1971 that almost nobody at the time would have bet on it still being talked about more than 50 years later. This isn't the soft, cuddly version of the story you've heard 100 times. This is the real one, pieced together from cast interviews, the director's own memoir, and decades of entertainment reporting, with every shaky rumor stripped out and every verified detail kept in. Here are 20 jaw-dropping facts you've probably never heard. Let's saddle up. Number 1. Let's start with the single most famous image from the entire film, the chocolate river. On screen, it looks like exactly what a kid would dream up. A thick, glossy, slow-moving ribbon of liquid chocolate, swirling past candy trees and giant mushrooms, with a roaring chocolate waterfall behind it. It looks edible. It looks like the best thing any human being has ever seen. And it absolutely was not. According to construction coordinator Hank Winans, who oversaw the physical build of the chocolate room set, the crew filled that section of the soundstage with roughly 150,000 gallons of plain water. To give it color and a bit of body, they mixed in powder of the kind used to flavor chocolate ice cream, not melted chocolate bars, and not real cream. Despite a popular rumor that circulated online for years claiming otherwise, director Mel Stuart himself addressed this directly in his own book about the making of the film, explaining that the river was an improvised mixture built specifically to look right on camera, not to be food grade in any sense. Still water, sitting for hours at a time under hot studio lighting with organic powder mixed in, does not stay pleasant for long. A sour smell crept into the soundstage within days, and never really left for the rest of the shoot. Julie Dawn Cole, who played Veruca Salt, later recalled that the river had been sitting, set up and ready, for nearly 3 weeks before they actually needed it for filming, plenty of time for it to sour. She also revealed that crew members on set had simply been dumping their leftover coffee dregs straight into the river between takes. By the time Michael Bollner, the German-born actor playing Augustus Gloop, finally took his famous plunge into the river, he wasn't swimming through anything close to chocolate. He later described the experience bluntly, calling it simply dirty, stinky water. Bollner has said the water was unpleasantly cold on top of everything else, and that he had to climb in and out of the river repeatedly over the course of the day's shooting, soaked through in wet clothes between takes. So the next time you watch a giddy crowd of children stare longingly at that beautiful brown river and imagine diving in face first, just remember that the boy who actually did it spent the day half frozen drenched, and trying not to think too hard about the smell. Number 2. If there's a single decision that shaped the entire personality of this film, it's this one. And it came from the actor, not the director. Before Gene Wilder would agree to take on the role of Willy Wonka, he laid out one specific, non-negotiable condition. As Wilder explained years later in interviews, including a well-documented conversation with Larry King, he told director Mel Stuart flat out that he would only play the part if his very first entrance went a particular way. Wonka would step out of the factory gates for the first time in years in front of an enormous crowd. He would be walking with a limp, leaning heavily on a cane, looking frail. The crowd would fall completely silent. Then his cane would get stuck in a crack in the cobblestones. Wonka, suddenly without support, would start to fall forward, faster and faster, heading straight for a faceplant in front of the entire crowd. And at the very last possible instant, he would tuck into a clean forward somersault and pop back up onto his feet, arms wide, beaming. Stewart, by his own account, was confused and asked Wilder why he wanted to open the character that way. Wilder's response has become one of the most quoted explanations of acting craft in film history, because from that time on, no one will know if I'm lying or telling the truth. Wilder told Stewart he would not take the role at all unless this entrance was guaranteed. Stuart agreed on the spot, and the crew built it precisely as described, because so few people on set actually knew the stunt was coming. The stunned silence and sudden eruption of applause you hear from the crowd in the finished film is largely genuine. Co-star Julie Dawn Cole has said the limp fooled her completely during filming. She genuinely believed, at least initially, that Wilder actually had some kind of physical impairment. It's a single piece of physical comedy conceived entirely by Wilder himself before a single frame had been shot. And it does more to define Willy Wonka as a character than almost any line of dialogue in the rest of the movie. From the second he lands that somersault, the audience is trained never to fully trust him again, which is exactly, deliberately, the point. If a contract condition has ever single-handedly built the DNA of a movie character, this is it. And if you're enjoying peeling back curtains like this one, now's a great moment to tap that like button and subscribe, because we've still got 18 more stories to go. Number 3. Here's something that throws a lot of longtime fans the first time they hear it. Despite the storybook English feel of the whole film, almost none of it was actually shot in Britain. Most of it was filmed in Munich, West Germany. The reason wasn't artistic, it was financial. The film's entire production budget sat at roughly $3 million, modest even by the standards of 1970. Shooting in Munich at the Bavaria Studios complex was significantly cheaper than building comparable sets on a Hollywood soundstage or filming on location in the UK. To understand why the budget was so tight, you have to understand who was actually paying for the movie. And it wasn't a traditional film studio. It was Quaker Oats, a breakfast cereal company with absolutely no prior experience financing motion pictures. Producer David L. Wolper was already in early talks with Quaker about launching a brand new candy line when the idea of adapting Roald Dahl's novel came up. Wolper pitched the company on a deal. Quaker would put up the full $3 million to finance the movie. In exchange for the rights to use the name Wonka on a new line of chocolate bars they planned to sell in stores, Quaker said yes, and that single decision explains an enormous amount of what you're about to hear throughout the rest of this list. It explains why the title got changed from the book's original name, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Quaker wanted the name Wonka front and center on every poster. It explains the tight budget, and it explains why the production needed the cheapest workable location it could find, which led straight to Munich. Bavaria Studios provided the space for the enormous chocolate room set, while the real-world exterior of Willy Wonka's factory was actually filmed at the gasworks belonging to Stadtwerke München, the city's public utility company. Stuart later said he genuinely liked that audiences couldn't quite place where the story was supposed to be set, even though behind the scenes, the production was really just trying to stretch a modest budget about as far as it could possibly go. Fact 4. Arthur Slugworth, the tall, gaunt, scarred rival chocolatier who appears out of nowhere to try to bribe each golden ticket winner, only has a handful of scenes in the entire movie. And yet he terrified an entire generation of kids, almost out of proportion to his screen time. The actor behind that performance had a real-life story far heavier than anything in the script. Slugworth was played by German character actor Günther Meisner, who was fluent in 4 languages and built a long career playing intense, sinister roles across European and English language productions. He appeared in films like The Boys from Brazil, Voyage of the Damned, and The Odessa File. Meisner became known, somewhat uncomfortably given the rest of his biography, for repeatedly being cast as Adolf Hitler across multiple film and television projects simply because of his look and his command of intense, authoritarian-sounding German dialogue. What makes that detail land very differently is something far less widely reported. Meisner had personally survived being interned in a Nazi concentration camp as a young man during World War II. A performer who lived through that kind of horror in real life went on to spend a large chunk of his professional career repeatedly playing Nazi officers and the dictator responsible for it, a strange, uncomfortable irony that rarely gets mentioned alongside his more famous role as a chocolate factory villain. On screen as Slugworth, Meisner leaned into a deep, deliberately menacing vocal delivery and a gaunt, scarred presence that made him genuinely unnerving to watch, even in a G-rated family film. He died in 1994 of heart failure while in the middle of filming a German TV series at the age of 68. Remembered at least outside of Germany, first and foremost as the unsettling stranger who tried to corrupt 5 children with a pocket full of money. Number 5. Here's a fact that genuinely surprises most people. The author of the original book absolutely despised the finished movie. Roald Dahl was hired to write the screenplay himself and was reportedly paid around $300,000 for the job. But according to multiple accounts of the production, Dahl fell behind schedule and ultimately delivered a script that leaned heavily on simply pointing back to passages from his own book rather than fleshing out new scenes. With cameras scheduled to start rolling, the producers brought in a second writer, David Seltzer, to finish reworking the script without much input from Dahl, and without Seltzer receiving any on-screen writing credit at all. To this day, Dahl remains the only credited screenwriter on a film he had largely lost creative control over. Dahl's frustration went well beyond the credit dispute. He had originally wanted comedian Spike Milligan to play Willy Wonka and was reportedly unhappy when the studio cast Gene Wilder instead, later calling Wilder's performance pretentious. He also felt the finished film shifted too much focus onto Wonka at the expense of Charlie, and reportedly couldn't stand the now iconic musical score, finding it overly sentimental. The fallout was lasting. Dahl effectively disowned the finished film and used his ongoing rights over the book to block any sequel for the rest of his life. It wasn't until after Dahl's death in 1990 that his widow gave her blessing for a new adaptation to move forward, which became the 2005 Tim Burton film starring Johnny Depp. In other words, the man who invented Willy Wonka never warmed up, in his own lifetime, to the single performance that turned his character into one of the most recognizable figures in movie history. That kind of behind-the-scenes drama is exactly the reason this channel exists. So if a story like that surprised you, go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe. We're only a quarter of the way through.
Number 6.
Long before visual effects technology made it possible for a single performer to play 165 identical characters, the 1971 production needed real, live human beings to fill out Willy Wonka's factory floor. Casting agents searched specifically for performers of short stature who could also sing, dance, and carry physical comedy convincingly while wearing heavy orange body makeup and bright wigs. 10 men were ultimately cast: Rudy Borgstaller, George Clayton, Malcolm Dixon, Rusty Goffey, Ismet Hassan, Norman McGlenn, Angelo Muscat, Pepe Poupée, Marcus Powell, and Albert Wilkinson, a group of working performers brought together deep in Bavaria to populate one of the strangest sets ever built for a children's film. Putting together the film's big musical sequences wasn't simple. 10 different performers had to be drilled relentlessly on tight choreography, all while wearing restrictive makeup that took real time to apply each morning. The Oompa Loompas weren't the only ones paying a price for authenticity. Denise Nickerson, who played the gum-obsessed Violet Beauregard, has talked openly about how much actual chewing gum her role required. She's described going through cartons and cartons and cartons of bazooka gum, since her character brags about chewing the same piece of gum for 3 months straight. By the time filming wrapped, Nickerson said her own dentist found 13 cavities in her mouth. She gave up gum entirely after that. Violet's transformation into a giant blueberry also required genuinely clever practical effects. For 1971, the production reportedly used 2 different costume setups, one for the earlier stages of her swelling, and a second, fully inflated pleated outer suit for the moment she balloons into a complete sphere.
Number 7.
Remember how this entire movie exists because a breakfast cereal company wanted to sell a candy bar? That candy bar bombed badly, and almost immediately. Quaker Oats tried to get a real-world Wonka bar onto store shelves to coincide with the film's release. According to producer David L. Wolper, the company simply couldn't nail down a stable chocolate formula. The bars were reportedly shipped to stores and then quickly pulled back due to serious production problems. Quaker's confectionery team apparently couldn't get the chocolate to set and hold its shape properly. The flagship Wonka bar didn't properly hit the market again in a stable form until 1975, 4 years after the movie had already come and gone. There's a genuine irony here. The on-screen Wonka factory promises chocolate so impossibly good that children lie, cheat, and travel across the world for it. Meanwhile, the actual real-world chocolate bar inspired by that same factory couldn't survive being shipped from a warehouse to a store shelf. The Wonka candy brand wouldn't find stable commercial success until Nestlé bought the rights in 1988, 17 years after the movie's release.
Number 8.
One of the strangest design choices in the entire film hides in plain sight during the movie's climactic final scene. When production designer Harper Goff first built the set for Wonka's office, director Mel Stuart looked at it and felt something wasn't right. The room was simply too elegant, too polished for a character as eccentric as Willy Wonka. So Stuart gave the crew an unusual instruction: cut everything in the room in half. The desk, the chairs, the safe. Virtually every piece of furniture in Wonka's office, with the exception of the light bulbs, was physically sliced down down the middle, leaving objects that look almost ordinary at a glance, but are subtly, deliberately broken and asymmetric the moment you really look at them. Stuart later explained he wanted the room to feel like a physical extension of Wonka's mind. Clever, original, slightly off balance, and ultimately impossible to fully trust. Years later, a number of Harper Goff's original hand-drawn production sketches for the film, including a design specifically labeled as Wonka's Half Office, surfaced at a Bonham's auction house sale, confirming that the half-cut furniture wasn't a last-minute joke, but a carefully considered piece of character-driven production design from the very start.
Number 9.
Julie Dawn Cole, who played the demanding golden egg-obsessed Veruca Salt, picked up a genuine injury while filming one of the movie's most memorable sequences. And if you know exactly where to look, you can actually spot the evidence of it in the finished released film. During the elaborate egg room scene, Veruca smashes open one of the giant prop golden eggs using a rock. In real life, that rock prop had a sharp enough edge that Cole genuinely cut her knee on it while filming. If you freeze frame the footage at the right moment, you can actually see blood visible on her stockings. A real unplanned on-set injury preserved, completely unedited, in the final cut of an officially G-rated family film. Cole was only 12 years old during filming, and by her own account, she was reportedly the only one of the 5 child actors who didn't have a parent or guardian present on set throughout the shoot. Decades later, she wrote a memoir about her experience, fittingly titled I Want It Now. She has also returned, well into her 60s, to recreate the iconic egg decatur scene for fan events, joking publicly that physically stepping back onto a replica of that prop gave her genuine flashbacks.
Number 10.
The boat ride through the dark twisting tunnel, packed with flashing strobe lighting, rapid-fire imagery, and Wonka's unhinged, sing-song delivery of "There's no earthly way of knowing which direction we are going," remains one of the most talked-about sequences in any officially G-rated movie ever released. That reputation isn't an accident. It's the direct result of a deliberate creative choice. The scene leans hard into disorienting visuals and rapid lighting changes precisely because the filmmakers wanted to break through the otherwise sweet, brightly colored tone of the rest of the movie with a genuine jolt of dread. Decades later, the sequence is still regularly singled out by film critics as one of the most unexpectedly frightening moments ever placed inside a children's movie. It's also one of the clearest examples of exactly the kind of unpredictable energy Gene Wilder fought to build into the character from his very first scene onward. Wonka doesn't try to comfort the children as the boat plunges into the dark. He leans into the chaos, seemingly delighted by their growing panic. It's the same instinct Wilder built into the character all the way back with that opening somersault. Never let the audience fully relax into trusting Willy Wonka. If sequences like this one are blowing your mind, you already know the drill by now. Tap that like button and hit subscribe, because the next 10 facts get even stranger.
Number 11.
Peter Ostrom, the young actor who played the film's lead character, Charlie Bucket, never appeared in another movie after Willy Wonka. And that wasn't because nobody wanted him back. Ostrom had reportedly been offered an option for additional films as part of his original contract. But once filming wrapped, he made the deliberate choice not to pursue an acting career at all. Instead, he went home to upstate New York, eventually trained as a large animal veterinarian, and has spent decades treating farm animals and horses in his community. He and several of his fellow child cast members, including Julie Dawn Cole and Michael Bollner, have stayed close over the years and regularly appear together at fan conventions celebrating the movie. There's a genuinely touching postscript to all of this. When Gene Wilder passed away in 2016, Ostrom updated his own social media bio with a line that quickly went viral. Former child actor, veterinarian, inherited a chocolate factory on August 29, 2016. A boy who on screen won a fictional candy empire grew up to spend his real adult life caring for livestock instead of chasing stardom, and by every account, he's never expressed regret about that trade.
Number 12.
Strike that. Reverse it has become one of the most widely recognized lines from the entire movie, repeated endlessly in internet memes for more than 5 decades now. What makes the line stick is the rhythm Wilder gives it, delivered almost like a verbal tick, a small glitch in Wonka's own internal logic that perfectly fits a character built to feel slightly unreliable and impossible to fully read. The line lands as hard as it does specifically because of everything Wilder had already built into the character before that scene arrives: an unpredictable, faintly untrustworthy narrator hiding behind a childlike sense of wonder. Decades later, that single moment has spawned its own enduring internet meme format known as condescending Wonka, built from one still frame of Wilder's faintly smirking expression, used online for years to caption sarcastic jokes of all kinds.
Number 13.
This fact bears repeating on its own because it genuinely explains almost everything else on this list. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory only exists in the form we know it. Because Quaker Oats wanted to sell chocolate bars, the idea to adapt Roald Dahl's novel reportedly came from director Mel Stuart's own young daughter, who read the book and asked her father to turn it into a movie. Stuart brought the idea to producer David L. Wolper, who happened to already be in early talks with Quaker Oats about financing a new line of confectionery products. Wolper connected the two opportunities, pitching Quaker on financing the entire film in exchange for branding rights tied to their planned candy bar. Quaker, a company with absolutely no prior experience financing motion pictures, agreed to put up the full $3 million production budget. That single business decision made in a boardroom rather than on a film set explains the rushed production timeline, the decision to shoot in cheaper Munich, the title change away from the book's original name, and many of the rocky, improvised on-set conditions that show up throughout this list. A breakfast cereal company effectively financed one of the most beloved fantasy films ever made, almost entirely as a side effect of trying to sell chocolate to children, and then watched their own candy bar fail spectacularly anyway.
Number 14.
To capture completely authentic reactions from his young cast director Mel Stuart made a deliberate decision to keep the children away from the massive, fully built chocolate room set right up until the exact moment the cameras started rolling for that scene. When the towering factory doors finally swung open in front of the children for the first time, the wide-eyed astonishment visible on their faces wasn't performed. According to Oompa Loompa performer Rusty Goffey, who was present on set, the children's reactions were completely genuine. They were seeing the candy garden, the chocolate river, and the giant mushrooms for the very first time in that exact moment. It's a relatively simple production trick, but an unusually effective one. Rather than asking 5 child actors to convincingly fake a sense of overwhelming wonder, Stuart simply engineered a situation in which there was nothing left to fake. It remains even now one of the most purely joyful, unguarded moments in the entire movie.
Number 15.
It's genuinely hard to believe today, but Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was a box office disappointment when it first hit theaters in the summer of 1971. Against its modest $3 million budget, the film only brought in around $4 million during its original theatrical run. The reasons were varied: muted critical reception at first marketing that struggled to capture the film's unusual tone, and many parents who weren't sure what to make of a children's musical that swerved so confidently into genuinely unsettling territory in sequences like the tunnel ride. For a while, it looked like the film might end up as a forgotten oddity. Then television happened. Throughout the 1980s, the film aired again and again on broadcast TV, introducing it to an entirely new generation of children. Home video sales picked up momentum from there. By the time Warner Bros. Re-released the film theatrically in 1996, it pulled in an additional $21 million, more than 5 times its original box office haul. Today, the film holds a 92% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and is widely regarded as one of the best movie musicals ever made. The film wasn't entirely overlooked at the time, either. It picked up an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Score, and Gene Wilder received a Golden Globe nomination. Even the soundtrack found a separate life of its own. Sammy Davis Jr. Its cover of The Candyman became a #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, despite the movie itself struggling at the box office during that same period. You clearly have great taste in behind-the-scenes movie trivia if you've made it this far. Go ahead and like this video and subscribe now, because we're only 2/3 of the way through this list.
Number 16.
You might assume the props from what eventually became an iconic film would have been carefully preserved. Instead, by most surviving accounts, the vast majority of them ended up straight in the trash almost immediately. According to collector Gregor G., who later assembled one of the largest known private collections of original Willy Wonka memorabilia, the production crew had to clear out of Bavaria studios in a hurry once filming wrapped. The reason was almost comically mundane. The very next production scheduled to use those same sound stages was Cabaret, the now classic musical starring Liza Minnelli. With essentially no downtime between productions, crew members reportedly ended up simply throwing large amounts of original Willy Wonka set dressing and leftover props directly into a skip outside the studio. Nobody involved in making the film at the time had any particular reason to believe that a modestly performing children's movie would still be celebrated more than 50 years later. Whatever original pieces did survive exist today largely by accident, scavenged by individual crew members, or quietly held onto by private collectors, rather than through any deliberate effort by the studio to preserve them.
Number 17.
Given how iconic Gene Wilder's purple velvet frock coat has become, you might assume his actual screen-worn costume sold for an enormous sum at auction. It didn't, at least not by the standards typically set by other iconic movie memorabilia. Wilder's original coat went up for sale through a 2012 Profiles in History auction. Despite the character's massive cultural footprint, the coat reportedly sold for a relatively modest sum compared to costumes connected to other major franchises, which routinely fetch prices well into 6 or 7 figures. It's a reminder that the film's beloved status today doesn't always translate into jaw-dropping auction numbers. For decades, Willy Wonka's cultural footprint lived mostly through quiet, unglamorous channels, television reruns, and well-worn VHS tapes rather than through splashy premieres or aggressive merchandising.
Number 18.
Only a small handful of the metallic golden ticket props were ever made for the production, and tracking what happened to each one over the decades became its own small thread of movie collector folklore. Julie Dawn Cole kept her own original prop ticket for years afterward as a personal keepsake. Eventually, she decided to part with it, selling her authentic prop ticket through public auction, a piece of memorabilia collectors specifically prized given how few genuine verified tickets from the original production are known to still exist. It's one of several pieces of Wonka-related memorabilia that have quietly surfaced at auction houses over the years since the film became a certified cult classic.
Number 19.
For a film that ultimately secured a G rating in the United States, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory pushed right up against the edge of what audiences of its era generally expected from a children's film. The tunnel sequence has been repeatedly singled out over the decades by critics and film historians as genuinely shocking in its intensity for a movie carrying a G rating. Its combination of strobing lights, disorienting editing, and unsettling imagery is frequently cited today as one of the single most unexpectedly frightening sequences ever included in any officially family-rated children's film. It's a genuinely strange contradiction at the heart of the film. A movie aimed squarely at children that in this one specific sequence seems almost actively designed to rattle them, and one that the ratings board ultimately decided didn't cross the line into needing anything stricter than a G.
Number 20.
Here's the fact that ties this entire list together. None of this. The rotting chocolate river, the carefully engineered somersault, the deliberately half-cut office set the failed real-world candy bar. The props thrown in a studio dumpster or the eventual decades-long cult classic Afterlife would exist at all if not for one 10-year-old girl's reading recommendation. Director Mel Stuart's own young daughter read Roald Dahl's novel and personally begged her father to turn it into a movie. Stuart brought the idea to producer David L. Wolper, who, as it happened, was already separately negotiating with Quaker Oats about a confectionery brand tie-in. The pieces of the entire production fell into place from there. A single offhand recommendation from a child became a $3 million gamble financed by a breakfast cereal company with zero film industry experience shot on a tight budget in Bavaria, using a stinking improvised chocolate river, nearly disowned by its own original author, initially met with a disappointing box office return, and somehow turned into one of the most enduring family films ever produced. It was not by any reasonable measure a flawless production. It was a stack of financial compromises and stubborn artistic choices that somehow, collectively, landed in exactly the right place. Sometimes the messiest, most improvised productions are the ones that end up aging the best. The film's influence has only continued to grow. Warner Bros. Eventually reacquired the broader film rights and, decades later, released Wonka in 2023, an origin story built specifically as a companion piece to the 1971 film, echoing its music and its version of the Oompa Loompas. It's a strange kind of full-circle vindication for a movie that, in its own time, was financed almost as an afterthought by a cereal company, dismissed by its own author, and largely ignored by audiences on its first release. If you made it all the way to the end of this list, you already know exactly what to do. Like this video, subscribe for more deep dives just like it, and let us know down in the comments which one of these 20 facts genuinely surprised you the most. We'll see you in the next one.